All right, we'll continue on here. So you might have to help me with the pronunciation of Deutz?
Deutz, yes,
Deutz.
Deutz.
Okay, so tell me about the prototypes you were developing for Deutz. Kind of what kind of tractors they were and why they didn't ultimately move forward.
Yeah, the Deutz engine program was like several other things that were looked at the time, sales and marketing, whereas always looking next door to see what was the next good thing. We had Detroit diesel Allison engines in the Steigers Series 1 and Series 2. By the time Series 3 came and I came, we were not putting Deutz engines into anything at that time, Detroit diesel, I'm sorry, or the Deutz. We were using Cat and Cummins engines pretty much when I started. But people like Detroit Diesel Allison wanted to come back and be used in our tractors. Case IH, there's Ford diesel engines, different engines around. Deutz obviously is headquartered in Germany. That's a Deutz, they had a whole product line. Somehow, the air-cooled Deutz diesel engine, which was a pretty well-known engine in the world, they either approached us or we asked them about putting their engines in our tractors, potentially maybe to have a better market share somewhere in Europe or Africa or some of the places where that excelled. I was an engineer, design engineer, marketing and sales and the direction above me decided that this was worth a look at. So we got two Deutz diesel engines shipped to us from Germany. And it was my project to make that fit into a tractor at the time. Now we had Series 3 tractors going at the time, and because we didn't have the radiator in the front of the tractor created the box, kind of that you had to build a hood around and look beyond. With the Deutz engine, you didn't need a radiator. You just needed to pull the air up front. So we designed it with a real sloping downward hood. In fact, Jerry Jubert and some of the other people, Jerry Jubert, I believe, called it the anteater because it had kind of a turned down nose look to it at the time, which was quite a bit different, but it really improved your line of sight and visibility, which if you look at most tractors today, they all have a really dropping sloped hood and as narrow as possible hood line to see around them. But we put the Deutz engine, the plan was to build two different models with 2 different horsepower engines. The first unit got built. It was used up here north of town. In fact, I know the guy who's rebuilding it now today, going to make it run again. It has like 7,000 or 8,000 hours on the machine, and he's going to rebuild it and try to have it in the show next year at Rolog, at the Rolog, excuse me. Show. So yeah, those were prototype project. I think it was probably 4 or 5 months that I worked on the project, got the engines installed, and it was a 24-volt electrical system, so we had to have a 12-24 system. A lot of times the big industrial stuff was 24 volts, but most of the ag-related stuff was 12, and there's ways to accommodate that. And some real challenges, but it was a good quality engine. Interestingly enough, one of the comments, it has a V-shaped engine block, and with the air intake in the front, one of the things this current guy who's rebuilding the engine commented that it makes a nice nest for mice to get up into the tractor and get up on the top of that engine and make a nest, and you don't know it. Now you've started the engine running it, maybe overheated a cylinder or two. So we were never in production, but the one unit ended up with quite a few hours on it, and he ended up with both frames. The second unit was never constructed, and the parts were sold off.
What is that feeling? I mean, you said it was about 5 months of your life developing it. When you hear that it's not going to move forward, how does that?
You know, it's an interesting thing because that's one thing about the design engineering group, the new product group, as opposed to maintenance or ongoing engineering where something's in production, there's a problem, you put a fix onto that, then it goes down the assembly line. When you work on R&D projects or new stuff, it is a pretty disappointing when it does not go somewhere, when the project is pulled or something comes and bumps it off the schedule and it's decided to not go into production, because it feels like put in a lot of your time and effort. I think it teaches you though, when you're in the new product area, to probably do it quickly and get it done quickly and wisely as well as you can, because if you wait long enough, likely something will always die. They're either tired of waiting for you or whatever. So I think getting it quickly and getting it done quickly is important in new products. On the Tiger 450, and it eventually was called 470, so I'll call it intermittently 450 or 470. That had to do with the torque rise of the engine and what ultimate horsepower it could put out. We wanted to sell the horsepower, so the decaling got changed. But we started that project, and in 6 months' time, we had it at the Farm Progress Show in Illinois as a completed functional tractor on display. When we said go, we had 6 months, and it had to be at the Farm Progress Show, an immovable date. And there are a lot of people that worked with me. I clearly wasn't the only person on the project, but I had a gentleman, Bill Martinson, who was involved with the cab at the time. He basically did the dressing out of the cab and the details within the cab. I was responsible for the full project, engine installation, the Allison drop transmission, and that was a KTA 1150. Big engine in that tractor. So sorry I went back to the details on that. But anyway, that was a 6-month project. That's pretty much unheard of to have a running prototype that we were marketing and selling as available to buy, not just showing a prototype. We were taking orders in 6 months.
You know, there's the opposite sides of the coin there, right? You have the one that never goes into development and it gets shuttered, and then you have the one that you have this great success.
Yeah.
What's that feeling like when you see these accomplishments, when you see something that you personally had such a hand and such a role in developing out in the field being a success? What is that like?
You know, I'm not sure you realize at the time, how successful it may or may not be. I spent 8.5 years at Steiger and moved on and became an owner of my own business and developed other products, and I have 28 inventions in my name, and some are more successful than others. But interestingly enough, on the Steiger Tiger, I happened to see an article the other day on an auction sale that was occurring, and it was a Tiger 450 at auction being sold, and that would be 50 years old next year. And I'm not sure I can think of many other products that are 50 years old and still actively being used in their intended purposes. A lot of smaller Fordson tractors and H's and M's and IH's, things like that over the years. Yeah, you see them on the farm. They used to be the main tillage tractor. They're now, pulling a hay rack around or giving hay rides or something like that. This is still a tractor that's being used today for tillage farming usage. They rebuild some, they redo the engines and stuff. So that's, you don't realize it so much at the time, and even in the 5 or 10 years after I had left Steiger, but now I begin to appreciate some of those things that were accomplished, not just by myself clearly, but by the team, the people that had the foresight to say, hey, that should be a good horsepower, and we need to be one step ahead of people. And Big Bud in Montana was making big tractors, but it's a great feeling to have something like that. And again, especially looking back, like so many things in our life, I'm not sure you really appreciate the significance when they happen. It maybe takes a few years to appreciate what did happen.
Yeah. As a father of a young child, you're like making me get emotional here. Like, yeah, you don't appreciate those moments.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. With little kids especially. And the thing about kids is grandkids are even better.
Yeah, I can't wait. That'll be fantastic.
Yeah.
You're starting to say you look back now and you really appreciate these things. Is there one accomplishment that stands out above the rest of something you particularly hold dear from your career?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think any of the products that went on to production of PTA, the whole Series 3 line, I was quite instrumental in, and that I can reflect on, because that sold a lot of tractors, a lot of horsepower ranges from 220 on up, 210 actually, and on up to 325 at the time. But the Tiger was a nice tractor. Accomplishment, the Allison automatics. One of the things we did was we had band-style band-style duals as they were called at the time. The Tiger-style dual wheels we created, where we welded the ring onto the dual and made that part of the assembly, and had a short bolt setup. A minor thing, not patentable. I shouldn't say not patentable. We did not patent it, but a very significant innovation. I have since, had about 28 patents in my name, and so, some are successful, some are not. Some of the things should have been patented and weren't, and that was a good accomplishment. And also, when I worked on the reliability side, I just had one of my former employees comment, oh yeah, I remember when you were doing some work in the reliability side, and I had a stint where I was changing positions, and I got involved with reliability and warranty work, and worked with the field people a little bit more than I had up until that point. And we had the big problems to solve, and we had the big list. But we also had little things. We had a lot of little things, nickel dime lists. So we created a nickel dime list, the switch that kept breaking, the sender that quit breaking, the neutral start switch that didn't allow you to start the tractor, And we did things like when we went from Series 2 to Series 3, we put rubber mounted engines, rubber mounted cab on the tractor. And that created vibration and shake to other parts of the engine that we had not seen before. So our air conditioner compressors, our alternators and bracketry and stuff and switches and senders were shaking off and breaking. So we were quite successful and quite reliable, but we were far from perfect. And we tried it, and if it worked, great. If it didn't, we fixed it. And so we created a nickel dime list, and he just mentioned it to me right now a few minutes ago that I appreciated, because he was a service guy in the field, and he said, I remember when you started, I was starting to hold these meetings and getting field feedback and trying to direct where we needed ongoing changes, and it was fun to hear that compliment a few minutes ago.
I mean, I can't believe you didn't see the shake coming with rubber mounting. How stupid can you be?
Yeah.
Jeez Louise,
Yeah.
how did they even let you in this job?
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I won't take credit for the idea. They started the process, and we were doing it, and I inherited the projects with it in that case. But no, I live and learn. Vibration is a real tricky thing, and I might just add to that, one of the big marketing and selling points, I mentioned the tilt hood a while ago, and the swinging seat were things that weren't being done in the industry, and just to be able to take that seat and rotate it while you're driving, and we had plenty wide room in the cab, you could turn sideways, and let me tell you, when you run all day trying to turn sideways and backwards in a seat, when I was a young kid I didn't think much of it, but now I really, really appreciate it. Those are two big features. But one of the features that was sold early on by the Steiger brothers was called the swinging drop box, and that actually worked okay with the standard mounts and the standard engines. But what it would do is it would swing and cut the angle of the U-joints during a turn. However, when you're driving straight, it theoretically canceled out. When you did turn, it created a torsional vibration within the driveline. Now, you're not turning all the time, so you didn't notice it, but when we went to the rubber-mounted engines and the rubber-mounted cab and things, it would cause a shake and vibration on turns. And then we also switched axles at the time. We went to the Hungarian-built Rába axle, which is interesting saga in itself, getting them from behind the Iron Curtain axles. They, for some reason, made that vibration worse. And so I spent about 3 or 4 months of my engineering career at Steiger driving around in circles in the parking lot trying to resolve a problem that was unresolvable with the swinging drop box, because when it switched right, it gave you torsional vibrations that you could cancel out there, but when you went back to center, you had vibrations, or when you went left, you'd have it. So it was a problem that could not be solved. And we don't have swinging drop boxes anymore in the tractors.
Well, I hope they had good dental insurance. Probably shook a couple fillings out doing some of those tests
Yeah,
over all those months. Huh?
The vibration was severe in a corner.
One of the questions Lee wants me to ask is, did you help build the dealer network for Steiger during the course of your career?
I didn't directly hire fire, so to speak, in that. I was on the engineering design side. However, I had a great reputation with the dealer people. And one of my bigger accomplishments when I was quite a young engineer after the Series 3 line was introduced, the president of the company was going to fly to Australia, which he did, Dave Kontoff, along with some marketing people, and they were going to launch the product in Australia, which we did do. And they needed somebody to go with them that could talk to could talk to people. So they took me. I had been with the company 2 or 3 years, so I was the engineering representative that flew to Australia with the president of the company to introduce the Series 3 line of tractors. And at the time, there was regional managers and other sales managers. With my background in farming and my ability, I think, to communicate well with people, or maybe better than average. Most engineers aren't very good communicators. I was able to have a reputation in the field where when I went to the field and talked to people, they understood, I wasn't there to just defend the engineering cause or whatever. And so while I did not hire those people, I had a lot of people that really appreciated, I guess, the job I had done, including, as I mentioned, the service guy a minute ago, regional service manager, and a lot of sales, good people in the sales side. But other than working with them, that was another group, that basically was, another part of the company. So
Australia must have been quite the adventure.
it was a lot of fun, and talking one-on-one with the farmers in Australia was great. Also, our Canadian customers. I mean, farmers, I've worked with other markets in the past. We've built commercial products that get sold to doctors and lawyers and engineers and city people, snowblowers and different things in my career. And farmers are a great group of people. They're the salt of the earth. If they can take it out of the box and make it work, they will. That's not the case with a lot of customers that you might be involved with making equipment for. Farmers are great. The attitude is great. The Canadian farmers were wonderful. The Australian farmers were wonderful. The American farmers were great as well. All over the world, farmers are a good group of people to be selling stuff to.
I would agree. Not necessarily the best to interview all the time, so you're making up for all the rest of them. You're doing fantastic.
We went to Series 3, we had trouble with some of the electronics, and we went from an analog radio to a digital radio, and digital solid-state electronics. We were blowing the radios out all the time. As it turns out, on startup of the tractor, when the engine fired and took off, the starter, which is a DC device, acts like a generator and kicked a 200-volt amperage spike back on the electrical circuit. It would fry the radio if it was on and you were cranking and starting the engine, but if you had the radio off, it wouldn't. So it took us a while to figure out why we were burning out radios.
Well, who's turning the radio off before they're done? So I'm sure I went through a lot of radios.
Yeah, we did. I worked on a special machine where we, for putting drain tile in the ground, a tile layer machine. We worked with a company out of Canada that was installing drain tile at the time called a tile layer. We made 8 of those, had a special transmission in it, and special problems as well. But that was another project that was interesting. We had an interesting trip when we went to Hungary. We went over there to the Rába factory. 2 things. On the way over, I was fooling around with a Rubik's Cube. And we got there. The Russians used to guard the border, but we crossed the border into Hungary behind the communist Iron Curtain at the time to machine gun toting people. And we drove in and we met with these people. And the director of engineering was meeting with us, and we were discussing axles. And he seen I had a Rubik's Cube in my briefcase. And he said, can you solve that? This was the director of engineering, and I was a lowly, like 3 or 4 year old, on the team engineer. And I go, yeah, no, I said I was working out on the way over. I can't solve it. I didn't figure it out. He said, he said, I can solve it. So he's sitting in this meeting. He said, I'll show you. And he starts working on it. Well, what I had done on the way over was I disassembled a Rubik's Cube to see how it worked. I couldn't easily solve it, so I disassembled it, just popped it back together without matching up the colors. And I didn't know at the time, but you couldn't solve it then. So he goes, I'll solve it for you. So we're in this meeting, and he's sitting over there doing this. And he would get like 3 out. He would get it so far, then he had 27 memorized moves that he would make to solve the Rubik's Cube. And he was sitting there, and he was kind of breaking out of the sweat, and he was getting mad. Finally, he threw the thing back at me. He said, I don't forget what he said, but he accused me of sabotaging the Rubik's Cube or something. I thought they were going to take me out and shoot me. But I said, yeah. I said, he made me disassemble it there in the meeting, put it back together with the colors matching, mix it up and give it back to him so he could prove that he could solve it. And he did. He did solve it. And we went out drinking that night and got stopped on the way back by the people on the interstate drinking and driving. I wasn't drinking, I wasn't driving. But all of a sudden on the interstate, a light, there was a guy out there with a flashlight with a radar gun. Then a mile up the road was 2 or 3 guys with machine guns standing, pulling us off the road. And the guy who was driving had an American cowboy hat on with an American flag, and they were trying to talk Hungarian to us, and we were English, of course. And they went back and forth, and finally he shined his flashlight and seen the American flag. American, U.S. flag, and yeah. And let us go. But that scared the hell out of us about 1 in the morning in Hungary, dark, and with the guys standing around with machine guns. So, that was interesting. That was a lot of fun.
Exactly what you'd expect in an engineering world, right?
Yeah.
Being in Hungary with machine guns.
Well, a lot of parties, back in those days, I had a few more beers, and they used to call them Steiger parties, where you'd stagger in to this party or dealer party, you'd stagger out, and the Canadians were some real drinkers, and we had a lot of parties that I don't remember probably though what was all said and done, but it was a great group of people. We worked hard, we partied hard, and we had a lot of fun.